Hey guys, welcome back to my workbench. We're going to be talking today about another technique you can do on these kinds of covered hoppers and other cars that really brings a lot more life to a basic plain gray car like this. So in the last video we talked about some sponge rust techniques, and ever since that video I've done a little bit more work to this particular car. I've added some graffiti, a little bit of patchwork, safety tape, and all that normal stuff that I do to a lot of these models. But we're going to go ahead and tie it up with the roof. The roofs a lot of times get neglected when people weather these. They don't get as much attention because you're focused on working on the side and adding that really cool rust effect, or maybe the graffiti, or you're doing patchwork or something like that, and so a lot of that focus goes into that. But I still like to focus on these roofs because, again, a lot of times you see people neglect them and they don't get as much treatment as the sides might. So I'm going to give you guys a very basic technique today on how you can do some really cool weathering effects to the top portion of this car, or any one of these types of cars for that matter, and it really brings a whole new level of texture and a whole new breath of life into a model like this. So why don't we go ahead and get set up and we'll get started on this technique. So what I'm trying to replicate is this particular effect here, where you can see some of that texture grime, and you can see how I've replicated some of that anti-skid coating that they paint on the tops of these cars. And it starts to peel off over time, it grimes over, it catches a lot of dust, a lot of rust can form up here too sometimes, and it's captured wonderfully on this center flow here. And there's other versions of this kind of weathering too, where sometimes it'll get stained up, like on this seed covered hopper here. I darken that with a little bit of powder work, but at the base level weathering effect, it's the same acrylic technique I've used here, using some gray acrylic, a thin brush, and we're going to be trying that technique on this MLLX center flow here. So for this technique I'm going to be using a little bit of Rainy Day Gray acrylic, but any dark acrylic will work. You can of course mix a little bit of black and white together and create your own custom mixed gray color for this. You don't need much paint, keep that in mind. It does not take much to coat one of the tops of these. And I'm going to be using a couple different brushes to get around the hatches, various things like that. You can see you can use a stubby short brush like this. You have your flat tip brushes, ones like these that can be a little bit more frayed out. I'll generally use a bit more of an aged brush for this as well. That way I can get a nice little blotch effect. And you're not jabbing the brush into the model like that. You're just very lightly tapping it to apply paint to the surface. Now, it's important that you have your model completely flat coated, because if this is bare plastic and it's straight from the box, it's not going to stick properly and this technique won't work effectively. So that's very important here. We also are going to be using a few Q-tips, and we're pretty much set up to go here. So I'm going to go ahead and start working. I should mention, if you guys want to on a car like this, you can remove this roof walk. However, you do risk breaking off the little tabs that secure it to the top of the car. So if you want to remove this to actually properly get in this entire area, be very cautious. It's very important that you don't break anything. If you do, it's not the end of the world. What you did have to do is just glue it back on, but it's a little bit more of an inconvenience if you have to deal with something like that, but it is doable. But most of the time I can get by it just by taking one of these thinner brushes. And I just basically will come in here like this, and I'll start applying the paint. And one of the big things I'm going to have to try to keep an eye on is if it's actually going to be a dark enough color, because as you can see it's relatively light, so I may actually add a little bit of black to this to get a full effect here for the demonstration, because I really want this to be completely visible for you guys to see what I'm actually doing. But you can see I'm just sort of randomly blotching this paint on. It's important to work around the hatches and then tuck it underneath that walkway without actually getting your brush up on that walkway. This is a very simple effect, and you can see you can actually do this relatively fast. Like, it does not take a large amount of skill. You're just doing a very rough blotchy paint job, so to speak. With the paint completely applied to the top surface, let this dry up for about 5-6 minutes. It's acrylic paint, so it will tack up pretty quick. And then we can come back and we'll start peeling some of it off with a Q-tip. Alright, so what you do is you take a Q-tip, after you stuck it in a little water, just blotch some of the water off on a napkin, and then you can come in like this and just start working some of that paint back up. Start scrubbing at it a little bit, and you can see it'll start to peel up a little bit in sections. and you end up getting this really neat little blotchy effect. You kind of work it around the hatch a little bit. But very quickly you start getting a really unique effect where you can see that paint is starting to peel off. And it really doesn't take much effort. It's just simple control with your hands and a Q-tip. And in some spots you can go lighter or heavier with this chipping effect. You can have some areas that look like they've held up better than others. But really the key thing is just work around those hatches like that as best you can. If you need to, you can always grab a micro brush, say one like this with the short stubby tip, and you can come in here like that a little bit and you can scrub some of that around the hatch a little bit, just as long as you don't overwork it. You still want to have some remnants of that coating around the hatch, but you can see it'll help to break it up and smooth out your edges just a little bit more than what the Q-tip can. So let's keep going. We'll just do, you know, have fun. If I can do another panel here. Just keep working it down here. Oh, I needed more water. Hang on. There we go. Just make sure it's not pooling up on the top. If you get a little pool of excess water, switch to a dry side of your Q-tip to kind of suck some of that water up. Then you can come back with the wet side of the Q-tip and start pulling some of that paint back up. But I'm really liking that effect so far. It's given us exactly what we want in terms of chipping. A few minutes later, this is the effect, and you can see it's very convincing. It looks like we spent hours detailing this with a brush or a sponge or something, and it literally took 5 minutes for me to paint this, and maybe another 5 minutes to just go down with the Q-tip and work in each individual section at a time. And you can see we've just achieved some outstanding results. So here's a couple hours later. I let everything seal up and dry, and then I went back in with some oils, set those in place, let them tack up a little bit. And you can see I just went over the roof walks a little bit to go ahead and finish up everything. And I ran a light grime wash over all these hatches to enhance it. Now you can come in here and you can blotch in a little bit of rust over that textured roof pattern there if you want. But I like to be able to just leave it plain like it is, because that's generally how you see it on a lot of these cars. But rust can form up here, and you can take that as you will, and you can add a little bit more rust if you want. But I'm pretty satisfied with this effect because we now have the rusty walkway panels, which is typical of an older car. The hatches have that nice rust effect, and we got this wonderful chipping effect that looks like we spent hours on it when it only really took minutes to make. When you really dig down and look at all these effects, you can see how they're confusing in that they look like they're so complicated, but when you break these down into what they are, they're actually very simple to do. And I'm hoping that videos like this teach you guys that yes, anyone can do this if they try. It doesn't matter how much skill you have, and if you're worried about it, take a piece of plastic or something, spray some dull coat on it, maybe paint it a little bit with that gray, and then just see what happens if you take a Q-tip with water to it, see how much paint chips off. Learn to work with this paint. It's very forgiving, and there's no reason why you can't go back, scrub it back off, and then try again. And there's more than one way to do something like this. This is just my technique. This is just merely for inspiration to give you guys an idea on how to tackle cars like this, where they're really not that complicated, but they can still go and be very detailed, and you can still make them look real nice with some basic effects like this. So I'm hoping that at the core, that's what I've been able to teach you today. Alright guys, that's pretty much going to wrap up this video for now. Just as a note, I will be working on more of these kind of tip, trick, technique videos pretty soon, but if you guys have some suggestions of things you might want to see, leave a comment below. You guys can follow me on Facebook. My name is Daniel Arnold on there. You guys can look me up there. On Instagram, on Dan E. Dankinson. That's all lowercase, and you guys can follow me there to see what kind of projects I'm working on. I'm always posting pictures of locomotives and other various pieces of rolling stock that I'm working on, so you guys can follow me there. again, shoot me messages. Let me know what you guys might want to see. I got all kinds of cars I'm working on right now. I know a couple people have wanted to see some more detailed videos on weathering tank cars with the kind of rust fades and grime fades, and I can return to that maybe a little bit later if I have some tank car prototypes I do. Boxcar roofs, like I said, is going to be one thing I'm going to work on because there's just so many ways to weather boxcar roofs. So that'll be another trick video that I will have. I really got to start filming some stuff as I do some boxcars. I got some boxcars working right now that I'm hoping I can start filming and be able to inspire you guys on how to do some of these techniques. So anyways, thank you for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.